Oh, all right. Welcome, everyone. This is the final presentation, the Spring into AI speaker series. We're very glad to have our presenters with us tonight. But we're not done. We're transitioning into thinking about the summer of AI series already. Those of you who were with us last summer, it'll be another pretty robust endeavor. The details of the lineups, dates, and such will be forthcoming soon. In the meantime, we're ready for a presentation called Generative AI in the Studio, Experimenting with AI Tools in Graphic Design Education. How can generative AI support ideation, and conceptual thinking in graphic design education? Through classroom projects, two graphic design students and their professor will show how Gen AI tools were used to spark ideas, explore visual directions, and expand conceptual thinking. Students will discuss their workflow, their role of prompting and iteration, and how they navigated the relationship between generated outputs and their own design decisions. The session presents project outcomes that illustrate how generative AI can support ideation while leaving creative decisions and judgment in the hands of the students. The speakers are Jenna Marble, the professor, Kendall Lyle, and Lauren Peters. They'll introduce themselves in just a few moments. If anybody, especially the Zoom audience, if you have any questions, I'll be monitoring the chat. Please post your questions in the chat. I will place a check mark under your question to indicate that I received the question, and as soon as I get a chance, I will relay the question or a comment to our panelists. And I think that's all I've got. Without any further ado, generative AI in the studio.
Wow, thank you. That sounded good. After I write things, I'm like, oh, did I write that? Thank you for being here online, in person, and if you're watching this in the future, we really wanted to, a lot of times when we get perspective on how we're using AI in the classroom, it's about instructors. We hear from instructors a lot, but we want to hear from the students. So thank you, Kendall and Lauren, for being here. I feel like I've had you all in many classes now, some foundational, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So this is Kendall. Kendall Lyle's a junior studying graphic design, game studies. Right now you work as a marketing assistant, is that right?
Oh, yeah. Marketing assistant and video production assistant.
Great. Anything else you want to say about yourself? It's all there.
I guess in my design process, I usually incorporate family means a lot to me, so I usually incorporate my family into a lot of it. And yeah, that's kind of it.
That's good. And we'll see an example of that. This is Lauren. Lauren's a graphic designer focused on branding, art direction, experience across hospitality, food, beverage. Last summer you worked at Universal. You can talk about that a little bit. And then you already have a job secured. Yay! Working with Boxer brand design. You're gonna be doing
Happy Meal packaging.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. And then I'm Jenna Marble. I'm a clinical assistant professor of graphic design, an affiliate of Siebel Center. I am clinical, so I have industry experience. That's kind of where my background comes from, and doing a lot of research on generative AI, how it affects the classroom, the industry, and currently co-editing a book on this very topic. All right, so I quickly want to talk about some of our approaches to Gen AI in the classroom, a couple examples of our course outcomes, and then I have questions because I really want this to be a discussion. I want people to hear from the students and how they feel about using AI in our design studios. But just a very basic high-level approach to how graphic design is talking about and using generative AI. Kind of think about it, and there's a lot of nuance in here that I can't quite capture in just a slide, but something very important that we are adamant about is still teaching foundations without the use of AI. So Lauren, for example, was in my type 1 class where we made our own display type. There was no AI whatsoever used in there. So we're still getting those foundations without using AI. We do a lot of reflection. We document the process. That is also really important when we're using AI in the classroom. And then when you're using AI outputs, it's not just about how proficient you are at using the tool. It's really evaluating how you're using it, how you're interacting with it, not just input in, input out. How are you interacting with the tool? Are you making smart decisions? Are you using it in specific ways? I mean, we really emphasize agency as well, that the students have to direct the tool. So they're still maintaining creative control, which you'll see in some of these projects. So here are some examples of how we're using AI in the classroom. So this first one, Kendall said that she likes to incorporate a lot of family and storytelling into her project. Absolutely. I'm going to talk briefly about what this project was, and then you can talk to us about how you like your creative direction. So in type 2, we have 3 type classes in our program. Type 1 is the foundations. That's what is type. We talk a lot about composition, very basics, layout, design. And then in type 2, that's a little more advanced, where we do brand concepts. We do a lot of brand research, a lot of storytelling. So in this project, students had to create a restaurant concept, and you can see here they have logo work. They do, what were the other projects? Social media, packaging, menu design was big since it's a type class. And then Gen AI came into place because we actually wanted to imagine what the space looked like. And so Kendall, you can see, I'm going to walk through it. You can see this is Kendall's work. It goes a little fast, but I wanted to make sure I showed your whole behance. So do you want to talk a little bit about your concept for this work?
Yeah, sure. So with the idea of designing a restaurant, when I think of food, I think straight to my grandmother, and she is very Italian, and she the lasagna and the manicotti were definitely dishes that were staples every Christmas for my family and came from her side of the family. So I kind of wanted to honor that ancestry with an Italian restaurant, La Mendola being my grandma's maiden name. So mainly the use of AI with this project, I used it in thinking up some of the background images and stuff with food, and then mainly this section right here, thinking of how the space looked. But I made sure to get a good mood board before I even touched AI, and get a good idea of what I wanted it to look like. And then if AI was ever going too far from what I wanted, re-uploading some of the original photos and asking it to pull back some specific things in there. And then also adding some of my patterns and stuff like that to mock-ups, like the napkins and stuff like that throughout. But yeah, it was a good balance of trying to incorporate things from my family. So I went back and found my great grandpa's original manicotti recipe that he wrote down, and made sure I was incorporating. The menu has a lot of stuff from my family. Talks about there's my great grandparents right there. Talks about them and how they came here. So yeah, it was a good mix of finding family stuff and incorporating AI. So a bit of my ancestry and very modern things put together.
Yeah,
so
it was great. And I think what you'll see too is that sometimes people think AI is a shortcut. It makes our work faster. Not necessarily, right? And sometimes it kind of complicates, and I think almost makes our work more strenuous. So it's really up to us as designers to go in and do our fine touches, go in there and kind of add these elements, at least in the state generative AI is right now. And I think you did a really good job of putting your own touch on it. So the next one, I teach inquiry every fall. And inquiry is an 8-week class that graphic design instructors can really kind of do, I mean, not whatever they want, but kind of. It's usually aligned with their research. So my research a lot of times focuses on generative AI. And generative AI is really good at helping us imagine the imaginary, I say. So for this class, this is Lauren's work. I kind of asked a question like, what if AI could help us imagine mythical places? So each student was assigned a different place: Troy, Atlantis, El Dorado. And these places lack historical reference imagery, right? We don't have a picture of Atlantis. So we used AI to imagine what that looked like. There was a lot of research. We watched documentaries. We did a lot. We went to, did we go to the library?
I think we did.
I usually go to the library with my classes because that's really important too, to kind of balance that handcraft, that handmade craft that we are still maintaining in our practice. But I'll let Lauren talk about her work. For this project, for this class, the class asked for students to make a logo, a flag, and a landing page. So we're saying, like, let's imagine that Troy was discovered. How would we get people to go? Lauren actually imagined like an art museum. of artifacts found from Troy. So I'm going to play this, and then Lauren, you can talk a little bit about your work here.
Yeah, so where I use generative AI mostly in the process for this project was in research and helping me organize that, condense it, and turn it into creative briefs. One thing that I really hadn't tried before that I did with this project was having AI ask me questions instead of asking it questions, which just helped me deepen my thoughts and think harder about what Troy would have been as. We also, I believe it's higher up, but we generated a map of what Troy would look like, which is something that would have taken like ages to draw. So it can be really helpful for speeding those processes up and just getting something, especially as a student, having mock-ups and fillers that you necessarily couldn't get otherwise.
Yeah. And I think too, I'm going to go back here so we can look here. Your flag was really beautiful. Flag design is also something very interesting. It's kind of taking an abstract idea, and it's a lot of symbolism, but it still has to represent something, right? So that was also a challenge, and I think you did a beautiful job of doing that. But you also incorporated a lot of research into it. It was very strategic and intentional, the design choices you made. So that was good. All right, so next semester when I taught design inquiry again, this one was a little weird, but I think it turned out well. I liked it. It was different. In this class, I asked, what if AI could help us kind of, I guess, be in conversation with past art movements or past moments of history, kind of like what we did in Lauren's section, but this specifically, we looked at Bauhaus. And so students in this class, they were asked to create artifacts inspired by the Bauhaus movement, but use generative AI tools to do that. So they were kind of in conversation with history, but using contemporary tools. So we use ChatGPT, we use Claude to kind of ask questions, tell me what, the main idea of Bauhaus is, what are some of the takeaways, what are some things to keep in mind as I'm putting this together. Kendall, your work, you created your collection kind of based on, what was it, like the House of the Future? Was that it?
It was like
space. Or was it space?
Yes.
It was space.
Yeah.
It was space themed, which obviously Bauhaus has a lot of those motifs in it with like the space ballet. But yeah, that's what we did here, and then used let's play. Here we go. At the end, we had a really cool gallery, an exhibition, and the block gallery at the school. And you could see here at the end, each student also made a poster and a postcard for the exhibition. And Kendall, your work was beautiful. And it was a really great way to see the difference between human and computer designs. One of the exercises we did in the classroom was asking ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini to create a poster for the event. And they all looked very, very similar. But then when we asked our students, our humans, to do it, it was a lot different, which I think was just a really great way to see that difference in, what humans actually bring to the table. Do you want to talk briefly about this?
Yeah, so I think throughout this class was kind of just going with the flow of the design, but then looking back on it, especially when creating this presentation for it, I kind of realized that while I think AI is like a fantastic tool, I definitely see it as like lacking the human touch, which I think it inherently does. But so I think this was really nice because I sat with AI a lot in the beginning of the class and really got to work with it. And we did a lot of talks on the different generative languages and which ones are more ethical. And we really dived into that, which I think is a great thing to do. And then in the later part of the class, we completely got away from AI and we went back and made everything by hand, which kind of allowed me to, because the world is always going on about like, oh, things are going to go away because AI, and it kind of allowed me to sit and be like, okay, there's still so much value in having a human touch. And so especially with the final postcard, I kind of wanted to ask, is it robot or human, and what does that mean to you? And yeah, I think it was really nice because the whole class was kind of very reflective on like how you view AI and how you want to use it, which I think is something I wouldn't have sat with if I didn't have the class, but something that especially now I think is very important to sit with and get a good moral boundary for what you want to do with AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. That's well said. And we went back to the basics a lot in this class too. A lot of Bauhaus talks about forms, shapes, primary colors. We were literally playing with blocks, playing with clay, right? Like doing simple color exercises, which I think was also very helpful. Mm-hmm. Okay, last example, and then I have questions. We'll talk about your process more generally. This was a type 3 class, so the most advanced class. This is one that Lauren took. It was also a little weird. Sometimes I get a little weird with my classes. But in this one, we kind of looked at the intersection of art and science and technology, where AI kind of came in. And we again had an exhibit, so that was kind of like the culmination of all the work. And then we tried to make complex ideas more visible, more understandable, more legible, and graphic design is a really good way to do that. So we took some complex ideas. Science is full of them. Some students talked about black holes. Some students talked about gravitational stars. You talked about asteroids, yeah. Right? And so AI was really good in helping us break down and understand really complex data and turn that into something more legible. And so the end result was a kind of a field guide that reflected on the 16 weeks of work that students did. We had Dr. Eunice come in, Dr. Nico Eunice, who works with art and design a lot. He came in and he helped us talk about black holes and gravitational waves. We visualized them. We did it by hand. We did it by using AI. He could say, yes, this is good. Actually, no, that's really bad. So it was really helpful and really good, I think, to see that graphic design is actually pretty interdisciplinary. And then we can use AI to help us really break down complex ideas, but then it's up to us humans to then tell the story. So Lauren, do you want to talk about your work?
Yeah, this class I think was actually really interesting because it really did push me out of my comfort zone. Like when I walked in and found out it was going to be a very science heavy class, I was like, wow, this is not in my realm. But I think experimenting with AI, with these concepts that, like Jenna said, are so hard to conceptualize, even like some of them people physically do not know what these topics we're looking at look like in real life. So I think it was just really interesting to use AI to investigate that. And especially like when we had Professor Eunice come in and he looked at some of the images we had been working on and was like, this is push that away. Like this doesn't work at all. I think was just really great to understand when you are using AI, you do need to be thorough and diligent with it. And I think that was kind of what I gained the most from this class was seeing that AI is a good support tool, but it is not going to ever be your end all be all. You can't replace design with AI. If you look at the 6 panel right there, it's some of the images AI generated, the bottom one there.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can just tell it's much more disorganized and not able to communicate in the way that a designer can. So I think it's an interesting way to look at design and experiment with it.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Well said. We also had a time capsule from that class that I said I would open in 2030.
Yeah.
I asked a question. I asked a few questions actually. So I'll be opening that. We can see what our predictions were like. All right. So I think we'll save questions for the end. What time is it? All right, good. It's 20 after. Okay, so maybe we talk for 20-ish minutes and then, or depending, and then make sure we have questions if anyone has it on the chat. Is there any questions now?
Not at the moment.
Okay, all right, cool. So I do have some questions. And if you have anything you guys want to talk about too, or anyone in the room, please feel free. But I guess I'm curious, first of all, either or both of you can answer, what felt different about using AI in your process compared to not using it in your process? What's the difference in project and outcome in your process? Do you feel like you lose or gain anything when you use AI in your creative projects?
I think for me, before I came to U of I had 4 years of design electives at my high school. And back then AI I didn't even hear the term AI until I came to school freshman year. So I was kind of very hesitant to engage with it at first. And I think the difference in it is that it can help you go beyond your limits necessarily. Like I remember in the start, I used it for help with figuring out a Photoshop tutorial, and even just in the most basic ways, or helping me code something for a project. So I think it just enables you as a designer to just do the little extra thing that as a student you often wouldn't be able to do on your own.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I think going off of that, it helps give you like a wider base level of things you can do, but it doesn't necessarily extend really in-depth things you can do. So like with the Bauhaus and AI class that we did, we were conceptualizing like furniture a lot, and I'm not an industrial designer, so I wouldn't have been able to make that otherwise. But I can't do really in-depth industrial design work because the AI systems can't do that yet. And so I think that is a really good level that it's at right now, where it can help me conceptualize things, but it doesn't necessarily take away any like advanced work that we're still studying very hard to learn, which I think is very nice.
I think one of the things I've been having conversations with other instructors and people in industry too is like making yourself ready for the future. And even tools change, tools become irrelevant. But what we do as designers fundamentally, I don't think will change, right? Like we are understanding our clients, we're taking what their needs are and we're turning it into something tangible. We are storytellers. And so even if tools change, that need remains the same. So I think it's important that in these classes, we're preparing you to do both, right? And I think that you both do that beautifully. Did anything surprise you about working with AI?
I think like you kind of touched on it earlier with like it not necessarily speeding up the work. I definitely, especially with the Lamendolas project and like looking at spaces, you have to be so much more detail oriented when it's generating things, because there's so many small things that where if you're just like piecing together a photo of a dining table, it's going to make sense. But if you ask AI to do it, AI doesn't know what's happening. So there's so many more things that you have to pay attention to that could be wrong in order for the work to look professional and final. So it definitely helped me be more detail oriented for sure.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah, Firefly is the tool we use, and the model is getting better, but a lot of times you can see it. The artifacts from your classes are kind of like an artifact of time. Like you could see how good the models were then. A lot of problem with chairs and legs of chairs, and that will get better, but it is interesting. It's kind of a time capsule of its own. Anything surprise you?
I think similarly, I was really surprised that it didn't always speed up the process. Like for the math that I worked on for Troy, I think I spent 3 hours at least like going in Photoshop and fixing the little details that AI, it's making a pattern that it can recognize, but it doesn't know how to put, like a temple right here and make that look as it would in real life. So
and consistent.
Exactly.
If you have multiple icons, how do I get those to look consistent across icons, right?
Yeah, so that was just surprising to me.
Good. What else? So was there a moment when you were working with this tool in this class or in any other class that it gave you something unexpected and that it kind of sparked something that, or so let me briefly say that sometimes when I'm working with AI, it gives me a lot of really bad ideas. And then I feel like it's my job to kind of find that one semi-bad idea or semi-good idea and then turn it into something better. And again, like it's really good at giving you a lot of information, and it's up to us as designers, I feel like, to polish it, to find that hidden gem. So were any of those moments?
I think that probably came up most for me with the restaurant concept project, where when I would be generating spaces, sometimes it would add something that I'd be like, oh, I didn't think to put that there. And then I would go back and find more reference photos of the actual thing. And it we always talk about being in conversation, but it very much was where it was like, okay, it might give me something new that I wasn't expecting, but then also I don't trust that that's quite how that looks in real life, or that that's where it would go. So then I'd have to go back to the internet and do research and find actual things, and then re-input it. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely more of a conversation.
Yeah, unexpected surprises. AI is good at that.
I think for me, this is actually with my internship rather than a class, but one of my projects this summer was to make brand books for the restaurants at the new Universal Kids Resort, which was surprisingly hard because I've never worked on kid related design. And I ended up getting a lot of creative blocks with it. And my manager was very AI oriented, so she had us turn to that for brainstorming a lot. And I remember one day I was working on, I think, like Jurassic Park, and I just could not figure out how to do the page numbers, how to make it engaging and fun. And it came up with like the idea of making numbers out of dinosaur prints, which was not actually what I ended up going with, but it got me kind of thinking on this different route of how can I take these little ideas and put it into different places of my work where it makes sense.
Yes.
So I think those little ideas that can spark that provide you with that first inspiration can really help break that creative block way quicker than you usually can.
That's good. That's good. A lot of times we brainstorm, we look on Pinterest, we look on Behance, go to the library, get outside. It's nice to kind of have not a collab, like something that you could be in conversation with to give you maybe that little push you need. And it's another tool, right? Like we would look for Pinterest, or now it's just something a little more interactive. But then again, it was up to you to take it and to make it something feasible, right? Yeah. Okay, good. That's good. Good example. After these courses, do you think you'll keep using AI? Will you use it differently? Do you think that what do you think? Do you think you'll use it, or?
Yeah, I think I've definitely used AI more since taking those classes. I think not as majorly or as focused on AI in those classes, but I'm definitely way more comfortable using it. Like before, I was very against AI and was like, I don't even want to deal with it. And now I'm like, okay, well, it does kind of help in some areas.
Why do you think you were against it? If I can ask.
Yeah. I think like in media, you see like, I think there was definitely some brands that were very quick to try and jump to AI. And so you'd see examples and you'd be like, that looks awful.
Like,
and yes, exactly. I wasn't going to say it, but you said it. And yeah, I think there's definitely, if you're too quick with it, I think it just initially felt very like sterile. Like it wasn't, I wasn't connecting with anything that was AI. But then when I sat with it and was able to like really, really make it what I wanted it to be, I realized, okay, that is a possibility and you don't have to be very fast with it. But I forgot what the original question was.
I'm sorry.
No, so fine.
I messed up your train of thought, but are you going to keep using these tools and we use them differently?
Yeah, I think the way I use them most right now is I use a lot of like generative expand for images, which I think is the most helpful thing I've discovered with it. Where it's just something where it's allowing me to design more. So like with me doing work with the U of I, we have like the whole 45-degree angle design that they love to use. And sometimes I like to do like an overlay, and I've always got like a corner of the image that I got to extend. And so with things like that, it's like this is allowing me to do more with design with things that would normally, it would just take too much time. I'd have to find something else. So I think in that aspect, it's definitely opened my mind to being more accepting to using it.
Yeah. I think for me, I take graduation photos, and editing takes so long with that, but with the new features like on Lightroom where it can, you select the area and it can use AI to remove it, or on Photoshop, stuff like that. It's such a time saver. So I think like that's kind of probably the most regular way I use AI. And I do think it's really helpful, like in a corporate setting, you go in your meeting, have the notes like condensed with AI. I think that the space we're in as designers, we're expected to move at a really, really fast pace in the corporate world. And it can really help you meet those demands in a more sustainable way for yourself.
Can you, if you're able, can you talk a little more about how your boss encouraged AI use? How did she do that?
Yeah, so she actually throughout the summer, I think we had 3 meetings where she gave us like AI master classes, basically. She, I mean, she was like all in on it. Like she had the self-driving Tesla. Like she was that into AI, which I loved it for her. But we talked a lot in relation to, because she was not a designer. She was a brand standards for restaurant, mainly looking at like plating in the restaurant, stuff like that. So we talked less about image generation with her and more about using it to streamline those processes that, you know, you don't have to use your brain for, the things that aren't as important, helping you like use the AI, what's it called, process maker, I think, in Microsoft, where it can automate like the email that you send every week that you have to remind yourself to do. So just helping yourself get rid of those tasks that if you were a higher level, you would have an assistant doing. I think it's really a helpful space to be in.
Which is something that, you as students, we have project management, we have a lot of deadlines that we have to keep track of. But when you're actually designing an industry, you're wearing many hats. Yes, you have to design, but you also have to attend meetings. Sometimes you're interacting with clients, you're meeting deadlines. There are a lot of things that you have to be as a designer. And so using AI kind of frees up some of that things that are automatable. Email summaries and projects and deck summaries. Oh gosh, those things are such time sucks. And then it allows you to be like big picture. How can I spend my time being more creative? We don't do a ton of that in the classroom, but as professional designers, we do it. And too, right? We do it a ton. Yeah. So that's really important. If someone's never used AI in a design class before, what would you tell them to expect? Or if anyone's thinking about coming to the UI, maybe it's like, oh, I don't know, are we using AI? Are we not? What might they expect if they come to our program?
I would say just come into it very open-minded. I think there's designers in our program that don't use AI at all and that use it every single day in every single project they do. And it's kind of up to you what that looks like. So I think that I really like U of I's approach to AI. I think it's a very balanced way to approach it, like especially with how we learn the fundamentals first. Like we have the classes where we make color charts by hand and learn layout and print and everything. So I think that it's just a very balanced approach at U of I to AI, I would say.
And I'd also say with one of the perks of the U of I being that we're a research institution, there's with all the faculty and professors that we have in the art and design program, and it's a very wide variety of things that you guys are studying. So I think it helps a lot to where it's like, once you kind of get a lay of the land of, okay, this professor's kind of in this area and that one's in that area. If you don't want to learn or focus on specific things, it's pretty easy to be like, okay, well, this professor is like what I want to do. So I'm going to keep trying to do stuff with them. So, and like you were saying earlier, we didn't have anything in the foundation courses. So like my whole first year was nothing with AI. I don't even think we mentioned AI. So I think you build the good foundation. At the same time you're doing that, you're kind of getting a lay of the land of what each of the professors are into. And then you can kind of go the way that you want to go with what you want to focus on and stuff like that.
I think that's a good point too. And you're right, we have so many different faculty and faculty interests. We have a lot of faculty that are the printmaking. Have any of you done the printmaking? That I feel like that is a really important part of practice, especially if you want to be a little more digital forward. I think it's nice to have that balance, that foundational craft that you maintain, which is actually becoming very important now with the rise of these generative tools we found. Anything you want to add before we ask some questions from the audience?
I would just say with that rise of like people returning to printmaking and foundational things, I think it is interesting that there are so many trends of handwritten things right now and like off-kilter layouts. So it's kind of interesting that that's like coming back. And I think that, potential students should keep an eye on those trends and how like that acceptance and big resistance to AI is happening in real time.
Maybe try to keep an open mind.
For sure.
I try to say that in my classes, it would be a disservice not to teach you how to use the tools. And then it's up to you if you want to use them in your practice. So just maybe keep an open mind.
For sure.
Okay, cool. Should we take questions? I know we're a little early, but
there's a question from Rachel.
From who?
Rachel. Have you thought about working with experts about design practices in their own domains? As cartographers, we are thinking through these AI designer domain expert collaborations, specialized domains, i.e. ecology.
Have you thought about working with experts
of design practices in their own domains?
I think we kind of started to explore that in the space class, where we thought like, how could scientists collaborate with graphic designers to better disseminate their research, especially when research funding is under threat. There's a lot of important research happening at U of I and elsewhere, but sometimes it's so in the weeds that we can't understand it, right? And so graphic design makes it more legible. So I think that was the beginnings of it. Not, I mean, cartographers not specifically. I do work a lot with the library, but if someone is interested in working with our class, I would say that was something that we'd definitely be interested in. In that type 2 class, instead of restaurants this year, I did hotels. And so instead of a menu, they actually made a map. And so we went to the map library and we're there with Professor Johnson, which was great. And again, like we're using AI to imagine those spaces. So then it was very important to me that we got that hands-on, tactile, analog experience going to the library and seeing and holding a map, seeing what the paper feels like, seeing how it folds. So we're doing a lot of that balancing when we're using these tools because AI can't tell. Like it can guess based on the data it's trained on, but that's different than actually holding it, right? So yeah, if anyone's interested, Rachel, if you're a photographer or an ecologist, we'd certainly be willing to collaborate. Yeah.
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
So throughout your projects, what have you learned, or what did those projects teach you about the relationship between the human? You talk a lot about human touch and the AI tools in graphic design. Right? What is what's your take on
what's the
relationship?
The relationship.
The human creativity and AI tools.
Yeah.
I think it's a really important relationship. I think as designers, we are interpreters in so many ways. And now we're interpreters of AI in these classes, in these settings. And I think that, AI can do so much, but in the end, it's up to the designer to come in and, draw what they're thinking or actually be the one to make that idea come to life or refine it if it's an image. So I think that the intervention in AI is kind of where the help is like useful. You have to put the final touch on it.
So is it fair to say that you view AI as a way to deeper human creativity rather than shortcoming it?
I would say if you use it in a way that promotes that. So if you're engaging with AI in a way that you're asking it or having it ask you questions and having it make you think deeper rather than saying, just do this for me and putting it aside,
Yeah, I think I also use it very much like, I think definitely it can't be the end result, but it also can't be the starting place. I think you need to, especially when we're talking about like working with clients, you need to have the personal relationship to the clients and know where they're coming from and know what it is that they want, and then use AI to kind of like you said, like deepen that understanding, and also like how we mentioned, doing the more like small tasks that would take up time and allow yourself the space to think harder about what it is that this client might want or how they want the final result to look. So I think it's definitely can't be the end, but it also can't be the beginning, I think.
Yeah. One of the things we've been talking about too is using AI for input or output. And a lot of times in our class, we use it for input. So we ask for ideas. We say, I have this idea. Can you tell me about the history of Troy? Can you tell me about what type would have been used for, scientific communication in 1912 for this periodical? And then it's up to the designer to take that and make something rather than putting in a prompt, having it output. We do that sometimes, like when we're imagining spaces, but we still are refining it. So it's never really prompt in and then that's the end of it. We take what you get and then that's what you present. There's still a lot of refinement that goes into it. But I think craft is really important, and that's why I try to balance. And that's why the fundamentals are still so important. So whenever I use AI, I'm trying to go to the rare books library or the maps library or the Bricker so we can really get hands-on and see that material, because that just makes it a little more alive, I think.
You also mentioned, sorry.
No, it's okay. Rachel's
So
gonna
you
email.
also mentioned the fact that you can see yourself using AI to save time on your mundane tasks, right? When you use AI on your non-mundane tasks as part of the creative process that you are obviously directing, how much work do you think you need to involve in interacting with the AI tool? I mean, we got a talk yesterday from Anthony Giacchino who was telling us his, creative process, and it seems to be very heavy involvement from, the human part, right? Is that the way you feel?
And was that was filmmaking, right? Filmmaking, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also a whole element of making sure that the conversation never goes outside of your understanding. And if it does, making sure that then you either use AI or get out of AI and do research so that you are at the same level as the AI. I think you never want to design something and then have AI add something. And you're like, well, that feels right, so I'll leave it there, but I don't really know what it's doing there. I think you need to make sure that you understand it. So I usually work with it, and then if anything starts happening where I feel like it's gaining on me and it's doing more than I am, then I make sure to reset that, and like with the generation of spaces, either get out of AI, find more reference images, and make sure to tell it to pull more from those. I think just staying on top of it and making sure that you're in control of the AI rather than the AI leading you.
I think it depends too where you start interacting with it. Or do you start with it right at the beginning of a project? Or do you do research? Do you have a brief? Do you have notes? Do you have a sketch? Do you have a mock-up? And then you start from there? Well, then your results are probably not only going to be better and more specific to what you're looking for, but then you're more in control of it, right? So I think it kind of depends on your starting point too.
So what I'm hearing is the creativity is still very much a human trait that cannot be emulated by AI.
For sure.
Absolutely. For now, right?
For now, it's very good. It can be surprising, but I don't necessarily know if that means it's creative, right?
I think it's like one thing.
Yeah.
I think one thing which I kind of thought about earlier when we were talking about the Troy stuff. I think AI is very good at forcing you to think outside of the box, because especially when it comes like typography. When you were talking about the page numbering, AI, to my understanding, it sees like patterns and shapes, and so when it was looking at page numbers, it sees the shape of a page number, but it's not understanding that it's a number. So then it was like, oh well, if I put things here, make it look like that same shape, then it gets the point across. And so I think with things like that, like logo design or something, I think it's really helpful to break things down and look at it as a shape rather than what we as humans understand them as like symbols or typography. And so I think it kind of, because it'll pull from random things that are similar shapes or something like that, it forces you to think outside of the box, which I think is a very helpful tool. But obviously it's pulling from the most common outcomes. So it helps you think outside of the box, but helps you kind of get a starting point for where to think from, but not an end point.
Yeah, that's good. It's a start point, not an end point, I would say. That's good. Those are good questions. If there are other questions too, I am going to put this up. I put Lauren and Kendall's LinkedIn on there, so we can connect with Lauren and Kendall. My email is at the bottom. Before we go, what's that?
I have more questions.
You do? Oh, okay, please. Oh my gosh, please ask. No, we've got 15 minutes.
Continuing on what you were saying, where you say AI give me that output now, and I need to, input my own creativity layer on that. At some point, AI will be using whatever is being created by you guys, right? Do you envision, and it learns very rapidly. At one point, do you think that it will be able to start generating output that you feel, oh, wow, that looks pretty cool, because of your intellectual input? And that brings me to, where should we draw ethical boundaries in terms of authorship, transparency with the client, all that stuff, right? And I'm opening a kind of worm here, but
no, it's okay. It's okay.
Well, what do you think? I mean, how do you view the near future? Because you're going to be graphic designer, right?
Sure.
I think when it comes to the idea of it possibly like almost being more creative than humans, I think at least at how it's learning right now, it's learning off of what you put into it. If it were to get to a point where everybody started using AI for graphic design, eventually all graphic design, I think, in my mind, would reach a point where it all looks the same, and then we'd have to bring the humans back because now it's only learning off of itself. So I think even if it starts pulling from humans, it's going to eventually come back to humans because, I mean, a computer can't be creative. It's only pulling from what's already there.
I'm just putting myself in a shoe of a CEO of a company who is driven by making the biggest, profit margin possible. And if I'm gonna see that AI can now generate really decent stuff, they may not be creative, but decent stuff, and that's what I need. Why should I recruit graphic designers? I guess. Are you worried about? I guess this is me coming into the question of how are we worried about AI taking the job of graphic designers, for instance, just like it's already taking the job of some programmers.
I think, can I answer?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's up to us what we accept, right? And what we reject. And if there's, a lot of things are AI created right now. And I think there's a lot of visceral rejection to that, right? Because we're like, absolutely not.
Yes.
So I think that's important.
There's a lot of bad stuff being,
Yeah. I think some maybe production design, we call it in graphic design, maybe that will start being automated. Those are things that are really, they are time sucks, and they're not all that creative, but they are things that graphic designers still do. So I could see where we get to a place where that's automated. And I think it's up to us as designers and as humans, we're very resilient. And as designers, again, like going back to we're storytellers at the end of the day, I think there's always going to be a place for that. And if graphic design, even if our tasks look a little bit different, and again, even if our tools look a little bit different, I think it's up to maintain what it is that we fundamentally do, which again is hearing our clients, making sure we understand what they're doing, turning it into something tangible, having that storytelling element. And I just...
So in your mind, what human skills do you think or traits are going to be even more valuable in the future to to work in a space that will be filled with AI agents and super agents? What do you think those traits are that we need to really elevate in our teaching here at an institution like yours?
So I would say creative thinking. So the World Economic Forum's, our job report from 2025 said that creative thinking was like the #1 skill that was in demand. It's on the rise, especially with AI. So that means how can you tell those stories? How can you hear what humans want and translate that into something? But also flexibility, resiliency, adaptability. I think those are all really important skills for us to maintain. And then to go back to your ethical question too, because that is something we talk about in these classes. Anytime we use AI in our projects, we have something you can see on their Behance pages that says generative AI was used in this project, human maintained creative control and decision making. We always have those disclaimers. So I think that's really important in terms of ethical boundaries. We talk about the tools we use. We use Firefly because that model is a little more ethically minded than some others, and because we can use it with our Creative Cloud account. And then we also talk about how are these models trained. We looked at, was it in Edge that we looked at that and how we looked at, this was another class that Kendall was in. It was an ethics class. And we looked at how all these different models were trained. And that was really helpful. So we're looking at these things, and it is still a gray area where not a lot of good answers exist yet. I can talk about governance, but I don't think that that's, super relevant right now to this specific presentation, but it is something we are 100% thinking about and discussing and being mindful of in the classroom.
And I think breaking down just the idea of us needing to keep honing in on creativity, because that's a pretty large concept and like what is creativity. I think human connection and interpretation is what I value most. So being able to, because anything that is going to go like advertising or that is specifically meant to connect with humans, AI is just not going to be able to do that. It's like I said, I think it's going to feel very sterile at some point. So keeping the reliance on needing to make sure you can connect with others and know how to interpret what they want, I think is what I try and teach myself the most, and make sure I hold on to those skills in my education.
So connection, collaboration,
Yes.
empathy.
Yes.
Of course, in addition to creativity.
Yes.
and
Absolutely. Empathy is a good one.
How about authorship? If you use tools like Firefly and I know the Adobe ecosystem is royalty free, but you may at some point use a piece of art that was created by somebody else, may not be actually labeled as created by X, Y, and Z, but how do you feel about saying at the end of your project, this is my stuff?
I think when we pulled from like when I was creating spaces for the restaurant, we pull from spaces that are already public domain. So lots of like Adobe stock is what we're putting into AI. So I think you need to hold yourself accountable on where you pull stuff, but also the AI regulations obviously need to get really good on making sure they're not pulling from people's work that they're just sharing and not, putting into the public domain.
Yeah. And I would say this summer, something that I really kept in mind was maybe sometimes in the process, I would use an AI generated image for like a filler. But with, Universal legally, they cannot put an AI generated image. At least their legal team doesn't want them to have that in a final product, especially working with like intellectual property. You cannot upload any of that into the AI programs that they use. So I think that we're still in an era, at least currently, where you do kind of have to self-regulate those boundaries, legal, ethical, because that's just not in place yet as a system.
Which I'll add, I think the U of I does a great job at instilling with us, or at least in your classes. I think there's I'm pretty sure we have protections on if we use stuff in like classes that isn't necessarily public domain, but I've never even really thought every time I do something, and I think that also helps with me working with the U of I. But every time I'm like, oh, I need an image, I'm like, okay, Adobe stock. I go straight to public domain. So I think
we have the license.
Yes. I think it's definitely instilled in us here. So which is great.
But we do so much work in the classroom, taking what we get. I mean, we're using AI, but it really is so small. If you look at their work, so much of it is still in the hands of our designers. It's just a very little part of the process overall. So much of it is still human directed.
I have one more question, but
These are good questions.
Can I? Do I have time?
Yes, go ahead.
And these are for the students.
Yeah.
If you would have, if Jenna would tell you, hey, guess what? You have 2 or 3 more weeks to refine your projects that you just finished. What would you do? And do you think you would use AI to actually help you or not?
I think the areas that I always feel like are lacking when we do AI projects is the refining off of the AI. That's always the part where I'm like, I want to spend more time and fix the AI.
Refinement class.
I think because it takes so much time to make sure the AI looks like realistic and has logic in it. I think that's always like a part that I'm like, I could have spent more time on that door, or the chairs were awful. I think I would go back and refine the AI more. I don't think I would use it.
So totally hear from you, you're critiquing the output from the AI. Okay, that's pretty cool.
I think so much of what AI lacks at the moment is that logic that you mentioned. Like it doesn't know how to decipher things in the same way humans do. So I think, so much of that time that I would want to go back and have would be to fix those images or that copy that it generated for me that didn't sound exactly right. All those kinds of things.
But it's not going to take much time to have that even refined by AI itself, right? I mean, I remember when we all started. When did we start? 2 years ago with AI, with the image generated. 2 or 3 years ago. 3 years.
Yeah.
It was really. I mean, you could see you had a hand with 7 fingers.
For sure.
And a chair with 5 legs. It didn't take much time for that to be evolving in a place where it was And some of the images that we have seen initially were like, oh, come on, this is really not.
Right.
And then suddenly it's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's almost real, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is just a matter, an issue of time. And how do you feel about the pace imposed by AI, actually? I guess that's my question. Truly.
I do think like AI definitely does increase demands on designers. I definitely felt that this summer that
That's interesting.
people
Okay.
who yeah
Tell us more about that, because
Yeah.
we are worried about losing jobs, but if it demands more designer, I want to hear about it.
Yeah. I think that you know, one of the things that one of my coworkers did when we were kind of having a rush at the end of our internship was she was asked by our manager to use AI to make a schedule for her last week. And the thing was, AI did not know how long tasks took. So it thought she could do, you know, way more than she could in one day. And I think that does kind of shift perceptions for people who are non-designers to think that things happen a lot faster than they do. So I do think that using AI to have your back on some of these tasks that you know it are not the most important ones, the things that people see, can be helpful to match that pace.
Yeah, I think people who don't have a deep understanding of graphic design, and especially people who haven't used AI for graphic design, they just think, oh, everybody's saying AI makes everything so much faster, but it's like we've talked about with having to do the attention to detail when you're doing things professionally, and it's not just a quick menial task that you need to get done with. There's a lot more time that then has to go into fixing the AI. And like you said, that might get a lot better later on. But yeah, I think there's lots of checks that you have to do.
I will say though that as a designer that it's been in industry for a long time, that's always been a misconception. Long before we heard generative AI, there was a deep misunderstanding of how long it took me to do a task. So that's just like fundamental to designer project manager relationships that AI might intensify, but that has existed for a very long time. So I think it's also really important just to communicate and like keep those soft skills open too, because project management is so important as a designer too. And those are also things that we're fostering in the classroom.
So all those human traits, but also the fundamentals of your disciplines are really important to have acquired, right?
Very.
Okay, so we're going to keep Jenna for a while then.
That was good. Thank you for those questions. It was awesome.
It's almost 2 p.m.
Awesome.
There are no more questions in the chat. We're going to wrap up. As I said, the spring into AI is over, but our involvement with AI here at the CITL is not. I posted a link in the chat to subscribe to our Gen AI newsletter. We will have another summer event called Summer of AI with speakers, panels. All that is now being in the process of being implemented, instituted, and promoted. So please keep your eyes and ears open for those announcements. And in the meantime, I want to thank Jenna, Kendall, and Lauren for their presence and for their very insightful talk. And with that, I sign off.